We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Beis Amud Aleph in Masechah Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 72a. The Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a Brayser, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, V'chim mipnei she'achal zeh tartim ar basar, v'shasa chatzi log yayin, just because this Ben Sorah Morer, he ate a tartimar of meat, and he drank a half a lug of wine, hoitalki of Italian wine. Amra Torah yatza lebezdin lisaka, the Torah says that such a person is taken to court in order to be stoned. Ella rather, higia Torah lesof daito shel Ben Sorah Morer, the Torah understands what's going to be at the end of the Ben Sorah Morer, shasof megamer nichsayaviv, because in the end he will squander the property of his father, umevakesh limudo, and he will seek that which he is accustomed to. Ve'eno motzi, and he won't find that. V'yotze leparshas derachim umelastem es habrios, and then he'll go out onto the road and he'll rob from people. And so Amra Torah, so the Torah says, Yamos zakai, he should die innocent. V'al Yamos chayev, he should not die when he is liable. Shemisasan shel rishoyim hano lohem v'hano laolam, because the death of the wicked is beneficial for them and beneficial for the world. V'lat tzadikim, but the death for the tzadikim ra lohem is bad for them, v'ra laolam, and bad for the world. Sheina v'yayin l'rishoyim, sleep and wine for the wicked, hano lohem v'hano liolam, that's beneficial for them and beneficial for the world. Lat tzadikim, but for the righteous, ra lohem v'ra liolam, it's bad for them and bad for the world. Sheket l'rishoyim, when there's peace, when there's tranquility for the wicked, ra lohem v'ra liolam, it's bad for them and bad for the world. V'lat tzadikim, but when there's tranquility for the righteous, hano lohem v'hano laolam, it's beneficial for them and beneficial for the world. Pizar l'rishoyim, when the wicked are scattered, hano lohem v'hano liolam, it's beneficial for them and beneficial for the world. V'lat tzadikim, but for the righteous, ra lohem v'ra liolam, it's bad for them and it's bad for the world. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hababa machteres, if somebody breaks into somebody else's house, he tunnels into the house to break in, nidon al shem sofo, such a person is judged according to what his end will be. Hayababa machteres, again, if he's breaking into the house, v'shavres achavis, and he breaks the barrel, im yesh lo damim, if it's a situation of yesh lo damim, meaning the person would be guilty if this person would be killed, so then chayiv, so then he has to pay for what he broke. But im ein lo damim, but if killing that person holds no liability, so then potter, so then he is exempt in terms of what he broke. And Rashi explains, Hababa machteres, again, the person is breaking into the house, she'amra tori hareg. The point over here is that the Torah says about such a person that he is allowed to be killed by the owner of the house. Nidon al shem sofo, he's judged according to his end, meaning the holo katal, because this person, he hasn't killed anyone yet. Umaktil mishum de sofo larug balabais, but the reason why he's killed is because in the end he will kill the owner of the house. Kishayamod kenegdo lahatzal mamon, if the owner of the house should ever stand up against him to save his money, to save his property, we know for sure that he will kill the owner of the house. Therefore, he's considered like a rodif. It's like somebody who's coming to kill somebody, and that's why he's able to be killed. Essentially, he's chayiv misa. And then the Mishnah said that let's say he's breaking into the house and he breaks something in the house, so then it depends. Im yesh lo damim, as Rashi will now explain, yesh lo damim chayiv. If it's yesh lo damim, then he's chayiv. He has to pay for what he broke, meaning im eino roy lehareg, yesh lo damim means that this is a situation where the person breaking into the house is not liable to be put to death. Kagon aval haben, for example, let's say a father is breaking into the house of his son. So a father breaking into the house of his son, the father will never kill the son, therefore he's not considered a rodef, and therefore you cannot kill the father. That's what it means, yesh lo damim. If you would kill the father, so you'd be held liable. Yesh lo damim, you'd be responsible. The Tanya lekamon, we're going to learn in the Brayso later on, the ein haben rashoy larog esaviv. In such a situation, the son is not allowed to kill his father. Haba alav machteres, if again the father is breaking in. Mishum derach meho aval haben, because we know that the father will have mercy on the son. V'lo balis kenefashis, he's never going to kill the son. V'yav a koi breili ape, if the son would stand in front of the father to defend his property, lahatzal mamona, to save his money. Ein bedaito shalav v'lahargo, it's certainly true that the father is not intending on killing him. So then, chayiv l'shalem hachavis kashar mazik, then the father would have to pay for the barrel like any other mazik, like any other person who does damage. However, ein lo damim, if there is no blood guilt, meaning to say he's not going to be held liable for killing this person breaking in, kagon shar kol adam, meaning any other person, shenitan rishos labalabais lahargo, where the balabais, the owner of the house, has permission to kill him, so then if he then breaks a barrel, pater milashalim, that person breaking in breaks a barrel, he doesn't have to pay for it, because he's already chayiv misa. To chayiv misa v'chayiv tashlum and bain kachad, because he's liable to be put to death, and he's also liable to pay money, and that happens at the same time. The halach is that you only have the more severe of the punishments, which is the death liability. V'aval pisha potter min hatashlumin, and even though he was saved, he wasn't killed, he does not have to pay. Tekaimalan, because we've established chayve misos shogagin kagon shalo hisru behen, Ein mishalmin moment. In these kind of situations of chayvei misos, even in a situation where there was no warning, but they don't have to pay the money she'im hamisa, which is together with the death, afal pi she'ein herag, and even though they aren't actually killed in the end, even though they make it out alive, but since they are liable, since there is permission to kill such a person, therefore we say that they're not liable to pay money. And the Gemara says, Amar Rava says, my time of the machteres, what's the reason by machteres, by someone breaking in? As Rashi explains, my time of the machteres, sha'amra Torah ein lo damim, why is it that the Torah says the person has no guilt, the person who owns the house is not guilty if he kills the person who's breaking in? Kilamar harei loch kemisha ein lo dam uneshama. The idea over there is that you can view this person like he has no blood, like he has no soul. Umutter lahargo, and therefore you're allowed to kill him. That's what it means, ein lo damim. What's the reason for that? And the Gemara explains, Chazaga, there's a presumption, Ein Adam Maimed Atzma al Lamona, that a person is not going to just stand there while his money is being taken. And so therefore the person says to himself, if I go, so then he's going to stand before me, veloshavikli, he's not going to let me take his stuff. And so therefore if he's going to stand in front of me, I'm going to kill him. And the Torah says, if someone's coming to kill you, hashkem lahargo, then you're allowed to get up and kill him. And so that's exactly the idea over here. The person breaking into the house, it's assumed that he's coming in with the understanding he might have to kill the Balabayas, therefore he's considered to be Bal Hargacha, he's considered to be like a Rodef, and therefore you're allowed to kill him. And Rashi explains, nobody's going to see someone else take his money and just be silent. Therefore this thief knows the Balabais is going to stand over his property and try to save it. And therefore the thief says to himself, if I go, he's going to stand in front of me, and if that happens, I'm going to kill him. And the Torah says to you, that there is no blood in this situation, meaning you are allowed to kill this rodef. It's teaching you that since he's coming to kill you, you're allowed to kill him. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav says, this case again, let's say a person breaks into the house, v'notal kalim, and he takes vessels, v'yotz, and he leaves. Potter, so then he's Potter, he doesn't have to pay for those vessels. My time, and what's the reason? Bidamim kananu. The reason is because with his blood he has now acquired these vessels. And Rashi explains, Hababa Machteres Choser Sabayis Mamish, again, he tunnels into the house. Potter Milachzir, he doesn't have to return them. And the Chiddush over here is, Afal Pi Shehem Kayomin, even though they're right in front of us, these vessels, he doesn't have to return it. Bidamim Kananu, because he acquired it with blood, meaning Bidmei Nafsha, with the blood of his soul. Kanan, he acquired these vessels. Hoel V'nischayev Misa Bilikichasam, since he was liable to be put to death because he took them, therefore he's Potter, he's now exempt from returning these kalim. That's what Rav says. And the Gemara now continues, Amar Rava. Rava says, Mistabra Milse de Rav. What Rav says makes sense. Bisha Shiber, in a situation where he took the vessels and he broke the vessels. To lesnu, that now they're not around anymore, then we would say he's Potter. Avol Notal Lo. But let's say he just took the vessels, but he didn't break them. Rava says, in that situation, no, we would not say that he's Potter. He would have to return the vessels. And Rashi explains, Mistabra Milsa de Rav de Potter. When Rav says exempt, b'sheshavar bein achshav bein lachar zman. That's if he breaks it now, breaks it later. De lesnu, the point is they're not around. V'tashlumin mididei lo matzinon l'chiyuvei b'makam misa. We can't make him pay from his own money in a situation where he was already liable to be put to death. Avol not alo, but if he just takes them, lo mistabra b'hamilsa, would not make sense in such a situation. De Rav de Potter boy, wouldn't make sense to say that Rav would say that we would say that Rav would go so far as to say, or we would go so far as to say exempt in that case. De kaven de kayom and hain, since they're around, kol hecha de isnu, wherever they are, de marayoninu, if they haven't been broken, they always belong to the original owner. Ve'in zechayev b'tashlum, and the point of Rav over here is, that's not called liable to pay money. To pikadon bi'almaninu gabe, this is just like a deposit. He's holding someone else's item. The item will certainly go back to the original owner. But the Gemara continues, but is that really true? This is like a language of oath of the Gemara. Rav did say that even in a situation where he just took it, and it didn't break. It's not true what Rav is saying, that what Rav says is only true when the vessels are broken. Rashi explains, this is like an oath. Amar Rav de Potter va'afilu isnu. Rav says Potter, even if they are in front of us. The reason is as follows. Let's say it's a situation of yesh lo damim, where you're not allowed to kill the person, like a father breaking into the son's house, where Rav admits that the father does not acquire, v'chayiv lahachzer acharei chen, he has to return it. So there, Amrinan, there we say da'afilu nen suminei mishabol l'reshus. So let's say some kind of accident happens. He takes the vessel and it breaks after it comes into the father's reshus. Chayiv lahachzer demei, and he would have to return the value. Al malo Amrinan pikadon havagabe. Now you see from that case, in a situation again where he's not liable to be put to death, you see that it is not just considered a pikadon, and if it breaks, it's the loss of the original owners. V'avdol bailam, it's considered the original owner's loss. El Amrinan bereshus hain. Apparently, this thief, when he takes it, it's now in his reshus. V'avdulo, and the loss is his. So hachanami. So here also le'inyan ein lo damim. Let's apply that to a situation where you are allowed to kill the person breaking in. Ein lo damim. Afapi de isnu. Even though the items are still intact, Amrinan lav pikadon inu. We should say that's not considered a deposit. Ela bereshuso uvachrayuso kaimi. We should say that it's in his reshus. It's considered to be in his achrayus. In other words, it is considered to be that it's transferred to the reshus of the gazlan. V'chi gavulhu beidin aminei, and therefore, if the bezin now collects it back from him, yesh kan tashlumin im chiyav misa, that would be called payment, and you don't have payment together with a liability to death. Ki'ilu govin mishar nechasim. It's the same thing as collecting from any other property. Meaning, the point over here is that when the thief actually takes the item, then returning the item intact is considered a payment, because we see that the thief has a certain responsibility for the item, let's say in a situation where there is no liability to death, and so therefore it should be the same thing. Rav's halacha should be true, even in a situation where the items are intact, he should still be exempt because of his liability to be killed. As the Gemara continues, what Rashi just mentioned, the daha yesh lo damim, because in a situation where it's yesh lo damim, where you're not allowed to kill the person breaking in, like if it's the person's father, v'nensu, and in such a situation, let's say he takes an item and there's an onus, there's some kind of accident and it breaks, so chayiv. So in that situation, the thief, the father, would be chayiv. Alma birashusei kaimi. So you see that whatever he took is really considered to be in his rishus. That's why his responsibility. That's why he's responsible for it. The thief is the one that's responsible. So hachanami. So here also, let's say in a situation again where it's a case of ein lo damim, where you are allowed to kill this person breaking in, but still b'reshus kaimi, still the item is in the thief's reshus, and so therefore we should say again it's considered a payment, and you're not liable to pay if you're already liable to be put to death. But the Gemara says velohi. That's not true. That's not a good proof, because kiyu kamino rachmona b'reshus. When does the Torah say that it's in the reshus of the thief? Le'inyan onsin. That's only true in terms of if there is some kind of onus, if some kind of accident happens, so then he's liable. Avol le'inyan mikna, but in terms of acquisition, b'reshus demarayu kaimi, it is still considered in the reshus of the original owner. And where do we see something that's analogous to this? Midi dehavi ashol. It would be similar to a borrower. When it comes to a borrower, so he's responsible for onsin. If something should happen to the item he's borrowing, he does have to pay. But if nothing happens to the item that he's borrowing, so then it's really considered to be a pikadon. It's just like a deposit. It's really in the original owner's possession, and the same thing is true over here. When it comes to this person who's breaking into the house, we'll say that as long as nothing happens to the item that he takes, it's considered to be in the original owner's possession, and therefore it's not really considered a payment. It's just returning to the original owner that which he owns. And Rashi explains, Velohi, it's not true. Maskana demilsa de Rava, who this entire sentence here is really the concluding words of Rava. Velohi, lo mistabra taima de Rav baha. It means to say it's not true. It doesn't make sense to apply Rav in this particular case. The afagav dehecha de yesh lo damim chayavin ba'achrayuso. Even though in a situation where you're not allowed to kill the person breaking in, we say that in that situation there is a chiyav. The person has to pay if something happens to the vessel which he takes. But lav kinyan hein lo. But still, it's not considered that he owns the item, lios kashar nechasav, that it's his like other property. When we say that a thief needs to pay, that it's in the thief's reshus, that's only true by paying money. So you can't say that the onus happened and therefore he's not responsible. Because we find by shomrim as well, by those who are watching items as well, they have to take an oath that they didn't send forth their hand, they didn't steal, they didn't use the item inappropriately. Hashalach, if they did send forth their hand, if they did use the item inappropriately, afagav detoin meso nishbar, even though they make some kind of claim that it died or it broke, dainu onus, some kind of accident, chayev, it's considered chayev, the nasel agazlan b'shlichus yad, because by doing that shlichus yad, by using the item inappropriately, at that moment, the person becomes a gazlan, and that's true again if something happens to the item. Aval inyan mikna, but if in terms of acquisition, lo kani im kayam and hein. The person, the thief, does not acquire it if it's still intact. And he wants to hold it back. He wants to say, I'll give you money instead of the item. Lo kani, that's not a kinyan. You have to return the item as is. Like the pasuk says, if something happens by accident to the item, the fact that you have to return money, so he can't say that it's an onus, so mifter pater, mishum de lo gara, gazlan mishol. That's just because a gazlan is no worse than a borrower. The mishum de chol hana shalo, because since a shoel is able to get all kinds of benefits from the item, ukminu rachmana b'reshuso, so the Torah says it is in his reshus l'shalume to pay im nenas, if there is an onus. The chol kama de kaima hadra beina. The idea again is, as long as it's intact, it goes back as is. Hanami, so here also kol hana shalo umechayev l'shalume. It's considered that he has all the benefit from the item, and he has to pay in a situation of an onus. But again, that is all true in a situation of paying money. But in terms of returning the item, if the item is still intact, we're going to say even in a situation where he's liable to be put to death, where this person breaking in can be killed by the person that's defending his house, even in that situation, if the item is still intact, the item has to be returned. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Baba Machteres, again, somebody breaking into the house, Vishiber esachavis, and he breaks a barrel. Here we're talking where the barrel is not left intact. So what did it say? It said, Yesh lo damim chayiv. It said if it's a situation of Yesh lo damim, meaning to say the person breaking in is like a father, is not going to be put to death, so then we say he has to pay for the barrel. But ain lo damim, but if you can kill, if there's no blood, if you're able to kill the person who's breaking in, so pater, then he's pater for paying for the barrel. And so the Gemara now says, Taima de Shiber, the whole reason why there's an exemption is because the barrel was broken. Techi ein lo damim pater. That's why in the case of ein lo damim, we say that the person breaking in is pater. Hanatalo, but if he simply took the barrel and the barrel is still intact, apparently that is not the case. Apparently the barrel does have to be returned, and that seems to be consistent with what Rava says. But the Gemara says, no, hu adin da'afilo natal nami. The same actually would be true. Even if he took the barrel, he would be exempt. It could be it's not true what Rava says. V'hada katani shavar es hachavis. Now the reason why in the Mishnah we have a situation where he broke the barrel, kamash malan, that's to teach us yesh lo damim, that in a situation of yesh lo damim where you're not allowed to kill the person breaking in, afa gav de shiber nami, even though he broke it, chayev, he is chayev. We're trying to say even in a situation where the item is no longer there, but he has to pay money. But the Gemara says, well, pshita, but that's obvious. Mazik, who of course he has to pay, he's considered a mazik, he's a damager, he broke something that wasn't his. The Gemara says, no, hakamash malan, it's teaching us tafilo shelo b'kavana, even if he broke it without intention, he still has to pay. But the Gemara still asks, my kamash malan, but what's the chiddush of that? Adam mud liolam, that a person is always responsible for any kind of damage that he does. But Tanina, that also was learned in a Mishnah. We learned in a Mishnah, Adam mud liolam, a person is always responsible, he's considered a muad all the time. Bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, bein bonus, bein b'ratzon. It doesn't matter what kind of damage he did, whether it's by mistake, on purpose, whether it's by accident, whether it was willingly. So we already know that, so that's not much of a chiddush either. And the Gemara says to that, kasha, the Gemara says to that, indeed, that is a difficulty. And Rashi explains, kasha, again, this is a difficulty. Kasha masnisin l'terutza liba de Rav. Our Mishnah is difficult to explain according to Rav, because again, according to Rav, the exemption would be all of the time, even if the item is still intact, and the Mishnah is specifically talking about an exemption when the item breaks. But Rashi notes, mikol makam tiyuvta lo hava. Now, nevertheless, the Mishnah is not a complete refutation of Rav. The lav behedya katani lo natal chayiv, because the Mishnah doesn't explicitly say that if he takes the item, he's chayiv. It just talks about the fact that there's an exemption when the item breaks. V'ika l'shanuye beduchka kidishan, and you can always answer with a forced answer like we answered, the mishum reisha nakat shavar, that the reason why we're specifically talking about broken is because we want to say because of the beginning of the Mishnah, a situation when you're actually liable to pay for it when broken, in a situation, again, where the person breaking in is not able to be killed. V'hainu di'ika ben kushil l'tiyufta. Rashi says that's the difference between a difficulty and a refutation. In this case, it's not a refutation of Rav, but it is a difficulty. And the Gemara continues, Mesav Rav Bevi bar Abai. Rav Bevi bar Abai asks a question from the following brisa. The brisa says, Hagonef kis b'Shabbos, if somebody steals a wallet on Shabbos, chayiv, he's chayiv to pay for the wallet, for the purse. Sharei nischayiv b'geneva kodem shiyavu lideyas Shabbos, because the liability for stealing comes before the liability for violating Shabbos. The idea over here is that the moment he picks up the purse, he has kona the purse, he has stolen the purse, but the violation of Shabbos only happens when he brings it into the Rishos HaRabim. They don't happen at the same time, therefore he's liable to pay for the geneva. However, the brisa continues, let's say he's dragging the purse out of the Rishus, so that the Kinyan only happens when he actually brings it into Rishus Aravim, and everything happens at the same time, so then Potter, so then we say he is exempt, Sharei Isser Geneva Visser Skila Boin Keachad, because the violation of stealing and the violation of Shabbos, of the Isser Skila, that happens at the exact same time. The moment he transfers it from one Rishus to the other, he has violated Shabbos, and at that exact same moment, he's also stolen it, and therefore, again, he's only liable to the death penalty. He doesn't have to pay. And this seems to be indicating that he doesn't have to pay even in a situation where the purse is still in front of us. And that would be consistent with what Rav said, that it's true again, he's potter again, even in a situation where it's not in front of us. This would be a question against Rava. And the Gemara answers, Vehilchasa, but the halach is, Deshadinu Benara. We're talking about a situation where he actually threw the purse into the river, and therefore it is not in front of us, and that's how Rava can explain this brisa. It's talking about when the purse is not here, that's why he's exempt. And the Gemara continues, Rava ignavu leidichrei b'machtarta Rava, there were rams that were stolen from him. Somebody tunneled in, broke into his house, and stole these rams. Ahadrinu nehile, and then the person who stole it, he returned it to him. Velo kablinu, but Rava did not accept them back. Amar, because he said, Hoel v'nafak mipumei de Rav, since it came out of the mouth of Rav, that again Rav said above machtaris is potter, even when the items are still intact. Rava said he did not want to go against the ruling of Rav, and he would not accept the rams back. And the Gemara continues, Tana Rabban, and the rabbis taught, Ein lo damim, it says again there's no blood, which means you are allowed to kill the bava machteres. Im zorcha hashemesh olav, and the pasuk uses the phrase, if the sun shines upon him. So the Brisa says, V'chi hashemesh olav bilvad zorcha, is the sun only shining on him. Ella, rather, what does it mean in the pasuk? It means in barlach hadavar kashemesh, if it's clear to you like the sun, she'ein lo shalom imach, that he has no peace with you, meaning he's going to kill you, then hargeyu, then you're allowed to kill him. V'im lav, but if not, if it's unclear, al targeyu, you can't kill him. From this price, it sounds like if there's anything unclear, you're not allowed to kill the person that's breaking into the house. But Tan Yidach, but we learned in another brisa, im zarcha hashemesh olav damim lo. This is on the pasuk which says that if the sun shines on him, then damim lo, which is saying that you're not allowed to kill us in a situation where he's not going to kill you. Again, the Brisa says, V'chi hashemesh olav bilvad zarcha, is the sun only shining on him. Ella im barlach, rather it means if it's clear to you, kashemesh, like the sun, sheyesh lo shalom imach, that he's going to be at peace with you, so then al targeyu, then you're not allowed to kill him. V'im lav, so this Brisa sounds like it's saying that if it's not clear, hargeyu, so then you kill him. And so the Brisa here is saying that if it's unclear, you're allowed to kill the person breaking in. And the first Brisa said if it's unclear, you're not allowed to kill the person breaking in. And the Gemara says, kasha stama stama, so now we have a difficulty over here. What are we going to do in a stam situation? What happens in such a case? Are you allowed to kill the person or not? And the Gemara continues and answers, lo kash, it's not difficult, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Beis Amid Beis.